A nuclear wasteland is now nature's laboratory for rapid evolution. Not with some giant mutant monsters, but with man's best friend. When the Chernobyl disaster forced an entire city to evacuate, hundreds of pets were left behind. What happened next is a story of survival against all odds, as these dogs didn't just endure a radioactive environment, they began to change. Today, we're going to explore how the dogs of Chernobyl are showing us what rapid evolution really looks like, and what else happened to all of the animals living in extreme radiation. Evolution's strangest lab rats. When the Chernobyl nuclear reactor exploded on April 26, 1986, it didn't just poison the sky with radioactive dust. It permanently redrew the map of life. Entire cities were evacuated, forests were scorched into crimson skeletons, and a 1,000 square mile exclusion zone was sealed off from humanity, but not from nature. While humans ran, something else stayed behind. Many of those who fled Pripyat town next door to Chernobyl had no choice but to leave behind their dogs. And now, all of these years later, the dog population is booming. Pripyat is ruled by dogs. It's become the most radiated doggy daycare in the world. The abandoned pets who rule the roost, dogs scared and starving, left to roam the irradiated ruins of Pripyat and the Chernobyl power plant like four-legged ghosts of the Soviet past, are now in control. But how did they survive? And how many of them have turned into freakish mutants? Almost 40 years post-radiation, their descendants are raising scientists' eyebrows because these aren't your average strays. They might just be evolving faster than any other dogs on Earth. The feral pack. Don't get it confused though, Chernobyl is not a cozy place to raise a litter. I'm talking like it's a mystical animal utopia, but the air still carries radioactive isotopes. That's not good for anyone. The soil is laced with cesium and strontium. There are hot zones where you don't dare spend more than a few minutes. And yet there are hundreds of feral dogs living there, thriving where humans no longer dare to settle. The fact they are thriving is what interests scientists the most. In 2023, a team of biologists from the University of South Carolina and the National Human Genome Research Institute decided to dive headfirst into the gene pool. They collected DNA samples from 302 dogs in and around the exclusion zone. Then they compared their DNA to the DNA of dogs living just 10 miles away in what should be a biologically similar, non-irradiated population. But weirdly, the DNA wasn't the same. Turns out the dogs in Chernobyl are completely unique. You might think it's from the radiation, and maybe it is, but some scientists think it's inbreeding that's to blame. Whatever the case, unusual stuff is going on at Chernobyl. Radiation versus inbreeding. The dogs of the Chernobyl exclusion zone showed clear genetic differences from their cousins down the road, literally just down the road. That raised a tantalizing question. Are scientists looking at rapid evolution caused by chronic radiation exposure? Dr. Elaine Ostrander, a co-author on the study and a dog genomics expert, suggested they may have inherited genes over the last 40 years that have given them adaptations to thrive in such an inhospitable environment. But there's a catch. The adaptations might not be from radiation, but simply from not having a lot of dating options. Radiation is infamous for messing with DNA, but so is inbreeding. And feral dog populations don't exactly keep pedigree charts. These dogs are the descendants of pets that were left behind in '86, and after 30-plus generations of surviving without kibble, dog beds, or spay and neuter clinics, well, let's just say the gene pool got shallow, fast. Are these mutations from radiation, or is this what happened to the Habsburgs? That's what Dr. Elaine Ostrander and her team were determined to figure out. The debate. Just when you think you've got a real-life X-Men situation brewing, another team of researchers shows up to ruin the party. In a follow-up study published in PLOS ONE, scientists from North Carolina State University and Columbia University dug deeper. Their research went down to the chromosomal level to look at the individual nucleotides of these dogs. Their goal was to find molecular fingerprints left behind by radiation. In a shocking reveal that no one saw coming, they found none. Nothing. Nada. Scientists didn't find a single piece of evidence to say that the dogs have been manipulated by radiation. Dr. Matthew Breen, senior author of this study, said that if radiation had been warping their genes in meaningful, survival-enhancing ways, it should have shown up in the tests, even after 30 generations. Instead, the team found that the dogs living around the power plant were genetically similar to those from Chernobyl City. And those dogs, in turn, matched populations in Russia and Poland. In other words, there's nothing special about the dogs at all. No X-Men powers, no glowing eyes, just very resilient mutts with very tangled family trees. They are unique dogs with unique genetic traits, but they show no signs of actually being radioactive. What does it mean? Despite the rather disappointing twist, the original 2023 study wasn't a dead end. In fact, it opened the door to something even bigger. Scientists can now use the Chernobyl exclusion zone as a natural laboratory to study long-term radiation effects on large mammals. And that is a win for science. Because for decades, scientists have poked and prodded everything from radioactive frogs to bacteria and birds. But dogs are different. Dogs live long enough to show generational changes. They eat the same stuff humans would. They breed in family units. They're basically Earth's little biological crash test dummies. Poor guys. So even if Chernobyl's dogs aren't growing superpowers, they are still invaluable to science. They don't have Hulk strength. They're not running around with two heads or wagging radioactive tails, but they are survivors, living artifacts of the world's worst nuclear disaster. In a place where everything went wrong, these dogs may help us understand how life keeps going. And that, in the end, is more remarkable than any mutation. Though to be honest, I'm a little disappointed there are no 3-headed, 8-eyed spider dogs with 7 legs and 16 tails. That'd be kind of cool. Chernobyl's baby birds. It's not the apocalypse we were promised. Dogs with superpowers was a dead end. And if you were expecting 3-eyed ravens or radioactive phoenixes rising from Chernobyl's ashes, that's a dead end too. Among the rusting Ferris wheels and crumbling apartment blocks, something unexpected chirped back to life in Chernobyl. And just like the dogs, these animals are not growing extra wings or spontaneously combusting. They're thriving. I'm talking about baby birds. Science in a radioactive birdhouse. To get to the bottom of the bird mystery at Chernobyl, let's check in with Sameli Pirto, a PhD researcher from Finland. Sameli recently decided to take on a simple, casual project. No big deal. He would just figure out what happens when you raise newborn birds in an environment that would cook most humans from the inside out. With the help of 300 nest boxes spread across both clean and hot zones of the exclusion zone, Sameli and his colleagues studied 2 species. One species is the pied flycatchers, and the other is the great tit. And yes, that is actually the species name. And you better not be snickering right now. One of these species is a local and the other migrates in every year like it's booking a radioactive Airbnb. The science team collected waste and blood samples from adults and nestlings, which to be clear means that researchers spent a whole field season swabbing tiny birds in irradiated forests. Keep in mind that the radiation levels across the exclusion zone are wildly inconsistent. Some of these so-called clean areas are barely above the background radiation you'd get sunbathing in Kansas. Other sites are 100 microsieverts per hour, the equivalent to getting a chest x-ray every hour, so not good. To put that into perspective, the levels in the hot areas can climb to about 870 times the recommended annual radiation exposure for humans. Even still, birds keep nesting there. Apparently, no one told them about the reactor explosion. The test results. So, what did Sameli find? Well, first off, birdhouses in high radiation areas were less popular. Only about 37% were occupied, compared to 57% of the birdhouses installed in clean areas. This seems to suggest that the birds know which parts of the forest are more radiated than others. Maybe birds have built-in Geiger counters? Who knows? There were also possible delays in breeding in the hot zones, meaning birds don't like getting frisky when the rods are up. But the big surprise was that once the birds did nest, their babies seemed totally fine. Same body weights, same brood sizes, no signs of developmental collapse or spontaneous mutation. Chernobyl's nestlings look just as healthy as their countryside cousins. It seems that the adult birds are wary of radioactive zones, but once the babies are born in those zones, they're perfectly healthy. So much for the apocalypse. But the healthy appearance of the nestlings was only part of the story. The real surprise came when researchers started looking at what was inside the birds. The microbiome curveball. Another part of the study involved researchers using the droppings to figure out what the birds were eating. And while the diversity of their diet stayed constant across clean and hot zones, what they were eating differed. In the radioactive areas, chicks ate more butterflies and moths. In clean areas, flies were on the menu. This is strange because moths and butterflies are usually more sensitive to environmental stress than flies. So either the bugs are adapting too, or the birds are just picky. Then there's the microbiome twist. Sameli looked at the gut bacteria in the birds' digestive systems. He found that the number of microbe types stayed pretty even, but their composition changed drastically between hot zones and clean zones. Birds throughout all the zones boasted the same number of gut roommates, but totally different personalities. Their microbiomes in their guts are completely different depending on if they eat more in the radiated areas or in the clean ones. I wish I could tell you what this means, but that's the maddening part. No one really knows what all these differences mean. Scientists are baffled. Do the altered microbiomes hint at metabolic stress? Is the diet shift a subtle survival strategy? Or are these birds just rolling with whatever weird bugs happen to be fluttering by? As Sameli put it, we have this image of Chernobyl being this mutating, super hazardous environment in which all manner of weird things happen. Turns out, reality is more nuanced. The birds aren't melting, they're not thriving in an epic Disney circle of life kind of way either, but they're just adapting, clearly trying to make the best out of a bad situation. Sameli has learned a lot, but he isn't done yet. He was recently analyzing blood samples for immune system markers. But so far, the birds of Chernobyl are proving far more stubborn to study than anyone had anticipated. He's got more work to do before this mystery is solved. His research reminds us of something easy to forget. When humans disappear, nature doesn't die. It gets weird, it gets complex, and it rebounds fast. And now for a quick break because it's shout-out time! I want to give a big thank you to Proud Trekker's wife and Gabriel Drum for supporting this channel. Thanks so much for watching. Be sure to hit that notification bell because there's a lot more where this came from. Chernobyl's most unexpected hero, the fungus. When reactor number 4 at the Chernobyl Nuclear Power Plant exploded in 1986, it turned an ordinary Soviet morning into a radioactive nightmare. The blast bathed the skies in ionizing horror, turned entire cities into ghost towns, and carved a no-go zone out of northern Ukraine that was more or less a giant warning label of death. But not everyone took the hint. You've seen the dogs, you've seen the birds, but have you seen the fungus? Deep inside the reactor's scarred remains, on the very walls where the radiation hit hardest, scientists found something that shouldn't have been alive. A creeping black fungus. Thick, dark, stubborn. And not only was it not dying, it was doing really well. Are you starting to see a pattern here today? Some things in Chernobyl are thriving, even the fungus. This resilient organism is called Cladosporium sphaerospermum, in case anyone asks you, and it drinks radiation like morning coffee. Photosynthesis of doom. This is no ordinary mold. You're not scrubbing this stuff off your bathroom tile with a spray bottle. Mr. C belongs to an elite squad known as radiotrophic fungi, and these are fungi known to consume radiation. Now that is a superpower. Think of it like photosynthesis, but with a nuclear twist. Instead of chlorophyll sucking up sunlight, this fungus uses melanin, the same pigment that gives human skin its color, to absorb gamma radiation. Then it turns that radiation into energy. The process is called radiosynthesis. According to multiple studies, including one from the PLOS ONE journal in 2007, these fungi grow faster when they're exposed to high radiation. Meanwhile, your average mammal would be busy growing tumors. This fungus is inside the reactor. Not even crypto could survive in there. Melanin's dark secret. Here's where things get scientifically bizarre. In most living creatures, melanin is basically a sunscreen. It shields cells from UV damage. It's why humans in high UV areas have darker skin and humans in lower UV areas, like Norway for example, have paler skin. They don't need to be shielded from as many UV rays. But in Cladosporium and its radiotrophic cousins, melanin doesn't just block radiation, it hijacks it, converting deadly rays into a biochemical battery pack. It's like giving a cockroach a solar pane made of plutonium. That black terry coat scientists found growing on the reactor's walls is a feast for fungus. And now scientists think they might be able to use it to clean up Chernobyl and make the area safe again. It's called bioremediation, the use of living organisms to clean up contaminated environments. The idea isn't new, but Cladosporium sphaero blah blah is the newest VIP in the organization. It might help stabilize Chernobyl by eating all of the radioactivity. It's like releasing a special kind of bacteria to consume an oil spill. And it's happening faster than anticipated. This fungus has already been tested for potential cleanup roles. According to research published in FEM's microbiology letters, scientists are studying how it could be deployed to naturally reduce radiation levels by absorbing it into its fungal biomass. It's like nature's own hazmat crew. Only instead of rubber suits, they wear spores. This fungus has even been to space. Space mold. In an experiment aboard the International Space Station, researchers tested how this black fungus might handle cosmic radiation, the kind that fries electronics and makes deep space travel a nightmare. The results were surprisingly promising. Some scientists now believe this fungus could be used to line the walls of spaceships, Mars habitats, or even 3D printed food systems. Why? Because it's acting as a living radiation shield. Think about the fluffy and very itchy insulation on your walls. This fungus could do the same thing, insulating spaceships from cosmic rays and protecting everyone inside from solar flares. Take that, SPF 50. This is SPF 5000. Though I should mention that even without the radiation-eating superpower, Cladosporium is absurdly hardcore. It shrugs off extreme cold, acidic environments, and very salty conditions. This thing is less your typical delicate mushroom and more of a bioengineered demon spawn sent by Mother Nature to grow fat on humanity's radiated mistakes. And the best part is that it's 100% natural. This is just what happens when life gets creative under pressure. Scientists are already looking at how its stress-resistant genes might help crops survive in extreme climates or inspire synthetic materials that can endure nuclear disasters. Who would have thought such a promising thing would be found inside the blackened, hollow pit of a nuclear reactor? The truth about Chernobyl's radioactive catfish. Of all the legends to crawl out of the radioactive fog surrounding Chernobyl, the two-headed wolves, the mutant snakes, birds that glow in the dark, none has captured the popular imagination quite like the giant catfish lurking in the depths of the old cooling pond. Locals call them monsters. Tourists swear they've seen one the size of a kayak. And every year, someone posts a blurry video claiming they have spotted a real-life mutant fish like the tri-eyed orange thing from The Simpsons. But here's the thing. There are no mutant catfish in Chernobyl, but there are radioactive ones. Like so many things in the exclusion zone, the truth of the fish is stranger than fiction. What the heck is in that pond? Let's rewind to April 1986. When reactor number 4 exploded and flung radioactive fallout into the skies like a nuclear confetti cannon. In the chaos that followed, engineers desperately tried to cool the melting core. They dumped thousands of gallons of water directly into the reactor. And when that water came out again, now supercharged with radioactive elements, they pumped it straight into the cooling pond, a man-made reservoir built to regulate the plant's temperature. That pond became a glowing soup of cesium-137 and strontium-90, two long-lived radioactive isotopes with a bad habit of sticking around in soil, sediment, and muscle tissue. Now imagine being a bottom-feeding fish living in that sediment for over 30 years. That's the life of the Wells catfish, Europe's largest freshwater predator and the unofficial radioactive mascot of Chernobyl. You would think that after nearly 40 years in that cooling pond, the fish might sprout an extra gill or two, right? But for some crazy reason, these dang fish just won't mutate. It's like, come on already, grow some tentacles or something. The Wells catfish are radioactive, yes, but they aren't mutants. But at the same time, they have grown ridiculously large living in the cooling pond. So what gives? How did they get so big? As Denis Wisniewski, an ecologist, explained, the largest catfish caught for scientific study was 5.4 feet long, or roughly the size of an adult human, depending on where you live. That is a monster-sized catfish. But it's not like it's so big that it could only be a mutant. Wells catfish have been known to grow up to 16 feet long. They can live for 100 years and weigh more than 220 pounds. And Chernobyl gave them perfect conditions to grow. No humans, no predators, no fishing, no competition, nothing but peace and quiet and radioactive bottom sludge. Honestly, the cooling pond is a catfish paradise. And while it's true that they are enormous, they aren't as enormous as they could be. But then if that's the case, how are they doing so well if they are so radioactive? It's because catfish are benthic, meaning they feed near or on the bottom of lakes and rivers. And this means they're in constant contact with sediment. The sediment in Chernobyl, as you know, is packed with cesium, which the fish absorb into their muscles and liver. Over time, their tissues become radioactive. But radiation doesn't automatically mean mutation. Guys, life is not a Marvel comic. I'm disappointed about it too. These catfish are contaminated but not transformed. Swamp Thing isn't about to rise out of the cooling pond. All that being said, you should not eat one because you yourself might grow a tail. I'm kidding, but I'm sure your thyroid wouldn't enjoy the exposure, so don't go fishing at Chernobyl. And then they vanished. That warning is a little late though. All this time I've been telling you about the fish in the cooling pond, but there's a problem. There are no catfish in the cooling pond. They disappeared years ago. In 2018, the last reactor was shut down for good. With it, the pumps stopped sending fresh water into the cooling pond. As the water levels dropped, engineers dammed up part of the diversion canal to keep what little was left. Some catfish had taken up a residence in that section. It looked like the pond would go completely dry, killing all the catfish. And that's sort of what happened. Winter came. Nobody saw the catfish since they usually slip into aquatic hibernation. Locals expected them to resurface in the spring, but they didn't. Suddenly, the pond's legendary giants were gone. Had they been secretly harvested by zone workers who don't mind radioactive fish for dinner? Had they escaped into the nearby river when the water levels dropped? Were they dead? Or had they just slipped deeper into the muck, waiting? Nobody knows. Today, there is still a bit of water in the cooling pond. Rumors swirl that the fish are dead, but it hasn't been confirmed one way or the other. There are still catfish in Chernobyl's rivers, but the legendary pond monsters are gone. A final act of nature reclaiming its space. In a place known for its shocking, otherworldly mutations, the disappearance of the most famous creatures is perhaps the strangest legend of all. The blackbird of Chernobyl. You've heard about the reactor meltdown, the not-so-mutant dogs, and the eerie ghost town of Pripyat. What if Chernobyl's horror started before the core exploded? What if the scariest creature isn't a radiated mutant horse, but a giant demon from prehistory with black wings? According to some seriously unsettling accounts, something was already circling overhead before the meltdown began. Beginning in early April 1986, weeks before the worst nuclear disaster in history, people in and around the Chernobyl Nuclear Power Plant started reporting sightings of a dark, winged humanoid. It was said to be a creature with a 20-foot wingspan, piercing red eyes, and a tendency to trigger nightmares and terrifying phone calls. It was dubbed the Blackbird of Chernobyl. And if you're hearing echoes of the Mothman, you're not alone. The stories are almost identical, and the Mothman could easily be the Blackbird's twin. It was April 26, 1986 at approximately 1:23 in the morning. Reactor 4 at Chernobyl exploded. A catastrophic steam explosion ripped through the core, followed by multiple fires and a radioactive meltdown. What followed was the largest nuclear disaster the world has ever seen. Radiation drifted over half of Europe. 336,000 people had to be evacuated. Entire towns were erased. And somewhere in that storm, according to multiple eyewitnesses, the Blackbird was seen again, gliding through radioactive smoke like a death omen on wings. Firefighters who rushed into the power plant, assuming it was a simple electrical fire, were met not only with lethal doses of radiation, but the glowing red stare of something they couldn't explain. Some of those men would die just days later from radiation poisoning, and they swore they saw the devil. Among the fallen was Lieutenant Vladimir Pravik, who passed away on May 9, 1986. He was a national hero and one of the first to respond to the blaze. Survivors of that initial firefight would later describe the Blackbird as watching them from above the burning wreckage. The guys on the ground first saw this thing like a judgmental gargoyle leering down at them. How creepy is that? After the disaster, there were no more sightings. The creature vanished. To understand the Blackbird of Chernobyl, we have to look at a similar mystery that unfolded 2 decades earlier in the United States. The Mothman. In 1966, the town of Point Pleasant, West Virginia, was plagued by sightings of a similarly unnerving winged entity, which became known as the Mothman. Just like how people around Chernobyl saw the Blackbird in the days before the meltdown, people in Point Pleasant saw the Mothman hanging around right before their own tragedy. On December 15, 1967, the Mothman was sighted moments before the Silver Bridge collapsed, killing 46 people. Locals reported glowing red eyes, enormous wings, and again, ominous phone calls and sleep-shattering nightmares. People experienced nightmares in Chernobyl too, and weird phone calls that made no sense. I understand the dreams. Maybe some violent and evil entity was attracted to the disaster and it poisoned the dreams. I don't know. But the phone calls? Don't you think that's a bit much? Was the Mothman hanging out at a phone booth pranking people? So bizarre. 20 years later, in a different country, at a different catastrophe, the same red-eyed thing flapped its wings and freaked people out. Coincidence? Folklore? Or some kind of feathered harbinger of doom from the spirit world? Exploring theories. The prevailing idea among believers is that the Blackbird of Chernobyl and Mothman are the same creature. They believe it is some sort of paranormal entity tied to massive, life-altering disasters. That doesn't necessarily mean it's evil. This might just be its purpose, like an omen of doom. It shows up, people have nightmares, the phone rings, the world burns, then it leaves and no one ever sees it again. Of course, not everyone's convinced that death has wings. The more skeptical camp points to a real animal, the black stork. The black stork is endangered, majestic, and native to Eurasia. It's also big, as in 3 feet tall with a 6-foot wingspan. Not quite as big as Mothman or the Blackbird, but still large. Though, if I'm being real, no black storks have ever been caught making phone calls. Putting aside the phone calls and the nightmares, it is possible that in the fog and panic of an impending nuclear meltdown, a large black bird was misidentified as a monster. That's an explanation that makes perfect sense. Except for the part where dozens of workers insisted the creature looked like a human-sized figure, not a bird. Plus, storks don't have red glowing eyes. Storks are supposed to bring babies, not omens of thermonuclear death. So what do you think that people saw in the skies above Chernobyl? Nature's most radioactive amphibians. When reactor number 4 blew its lid, it was as if the entire region had been erased from the living world. Humans fled, buildings rotted, radiation levels skyrocketed past survivable limits, and for years, Chernobyl stood as a grim monument to what happens when mankind oversteps and the atoms fight back. But in the eerie silence, something strange emerged. Scientists started noticing something truly bizarre. Frogs that seem to have become immortal. Now researchers are scrambling to study them because Chernobyl's frogs might just be rewriting everything we thought we knew about radiation, survival, and the audacity of life itself. The frog that refused to die. Eastern tree frogs are usually cheerful little things. They're bright green, chirpy, and about as threatening as a lime wedge. But in the exclusion zone of Chernobyl, where the ground still hums with radioactive decay, scientists started noticing an off-brand variety. They started seeing frogs that were pure black, like tree frogs suited up as Batman or something. You'd think turning black would be a bad sign, but these frogs were like super soldiers. thriving in the radioactive zone. In 2022, a study co-authored by Spanish biologist Dr. Germán Orizaola revealed something mind-blowing. These black frogs weren't suffering from advanced aging, cancer, or other radiation-induced horrors. They were aging normally, reproducing normally, and carrying on with their lives like nothing ever exploded nearby. Dr. O compared them to frogs outside the disaster zone in Eastern Europe and as far away as the Middle East, and found no significant difference in age, structure, or overall vitality. Somehow, the frogs in one of the most radioactive places on Earth were just as healthy as the ones everywhere else. How is that possible? Turns out, being a little goth might come in handy during a nuclear disaster. The frog's black skin is packed with melanin, the same pigment I told you about earlier. But what I failed to mention is that melanin can absorb and dissipate radiation. It blocks UV rays, yes, but it also blocks rads. This is an actual biological adaptation playing out in real time. The frogs weren't born this way before the meltdown. They've likely evolved their darker skin since the accident, as a response to their radioactive environment. It's as if nature took one look at the fallout and turned up the melanin dial. And it worked. If frogs can hack it, what about us? If frogs can evolve in less than 40 years to resist radiation damage, changing their skin in less than half a human lifespan, what does that say about other species? What does that say about humans? Dr. O noted that more than 90% of the radioactive material released in 1986 has already decayed or vanished. According to him, reoccupying most of the Chernobyl zone is scientifically possible. Maybe the legacy of Chernobyl isn't just about human error, tragedy, and evacuation. Maybe it's also about evolution and overdrive, and the incredible, stubborn persistence of life in the face of catastrophe. We all thought animals in Chernobyl would turn into freaks, like from Fallout or something, but no death clause yet, just animals evolving at an astounding rate to survive in what was supposed to be the unsurvivable. Thanks for watching. Would you be brave enough to move back to the exclusion zone? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Remember to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't miss out. See you next time. Bye!